So when we talk about tactical shooters these past few months, as we anticipated Ghost Recon Breakpoint, we went over things like how tiered loot should work, or how maybe we can play around with the idea of weapons jamming and weapons not jamming, and how to put attachments on weapons and crafting certain things for specific weapons, and how we could really just push the tactical shooter genre forward. And I was really talking as far as breakpoint wise, shooting enemies, how they get hit. I've had countless videos on what I think would make this genre better, this game a lot better. And a lot of the decisions I felt like the developers took were wrong. And as you see, I made a lot of videos speaking on how they could really hone in on different ideas. One was the suppressor idea, with different types of suppressors, different types of bullets, and that giving different types of sound. So different suppressor with a different bullet would be louder or quieter, meaning a sniper would have a different loadout, a panther would have a different loadout. So many things to discuss, and I've been wanting to discuss this one for a while, which is raids. And I wanted to get this video out before the raids even really came out. Let's discuss what I think raiding should be, not only for Ghost Recon Breakpoint, but for the tactical shooter genre, and how I feel. I think we're going to be disappointed, especially after seeing the Walker boss fight. Wolves come out. You can't kill Walker unless you shoot drones, otherwise he's basically immune to being killed. And these are the mechanics I fear, and this is why I know we're not going to get raids that even make sense for a tactical shooter. This genre is basically being neutered. It's being destroyed by the people who were basically keeping it alive, which is Ubisoft. So here's some things I wanted to discuss, like how raiding would work in a game like Ghost Recon Breakpoint. So right off the bat, whether it's 4-man, 8-man, however it is, we can't have people standing around and shooting something with a high damage meter like we have in the Division. All right, we need to have developers know that we don't mind communicating with each other, figuring out who's doing what when it comes to working together in a raid, in whatever scenario you give to us. World of Warcraft back in 05, you needed to go on Ventrilo. For a lot of you older people, whatever Discord is now, we use like Ventrilo, and there were other things that people used because you had to communicate with each other to get through those raids. It was, it was a big deal. There would need to be a lot of communication. Don't sit here and tell me that in 2019, soon to be 2020, you can't design a raid boss for 4 people to communicate with each other. We all have mics. We all communicate with each other anyway. And you know what? At that level of the game, it should be okay to design for that. If you need people to communicate with each other, you don't need to design for 4 idiots to sit there just shooting something until it blows up. So this is what I'm thinking for different types of ideas for what should be in raids. You all let me know if you have ideas. Let me know in the comments. Obviously, like always, we could always discuss a lot of good things. One is timing puzzles, right? So obstacles that are solved via a timer function. Otherwise, maybe the base goes on alert and the team is overwhelmed with enemies and killed. So what I'm thinking of, something like this. Let's say this raid is 4 people. So let's say we have to infiltrate this base head on, right? Maybe it's on a peninsula or whatnot. So we're infiltrating this base, and there are multiple tangos checking in to a control tower. And let's say it's 3 tangos and the control tower person checking in. So it's Sentry 1, status report. Sentry 1, all clear. Sentry 2, status report. Sentry 2, all clear. Sentry 3, status report. Sentry 3, all clear. So as a first boss, so just first part of the raid, the 4 players have to figure out, okay, how do we get through this? So at first, maybe you'd shoot the 3 sentries, and all of a sudden, sentries, check in, alert, alert, sentries are down, sentries are down. The base goes on alert, you're overswarmed with enemies, you're getting a big gunfight, but they keep coming, you die. Okay, that's not the way to do it. All right, so what do we do next? So what we want here, at this point, when I say timer puzzles, is one person has to infiltrate and go to the control tower. The control tower can be relatively close, so you don't have 3 people set up for a sniper shot and one person taking 10 minutes to get to the control tower. It could be an easy breach of the gate, maybe around the side, sneak in, go up to the control tower, and at the same time, you have to eliminate all 3 sentries and grab the control tower guard, or eliminate the control tower guard. All right, so when I say timer functions, it's things like that, things where you have to do things simultaneously, things that they would do in Hollywood, where one person would snipe one person and another person would do something else. So you'd have 3 of the 4 raid members set up for sentry sniper shots, and the 4th member sneak in, the Panther or whatever, one guy who's designated, sneak in, get to a point where he can grab the communication tower guard, and at the same time he grabs the guard, the 3 sentries get taken down, you move into the next phase of the raid. You know, now you infiltrate the base. There can be stealth puzzles. So enemies overlooking areas that rotate and patrol, and you must sneak by, risk being seen and annihilated. Obviously, if you're seen, there's an overflow of enemies that overtake your position. They never stop until you're dead. It's basically a kill mechanic, like the drone swarm that they have. You know, it's basically you're overwhelmed and you die. But what I mean by this is, for all 4 players, maybe the developers can create a puzzle system with patrolling guards. So you have a system where one guard patrols this way, another one this way, another one this way, and you have to figure out how to maneuver through this one area to get through these guards. If you shoot them, it goes on alert. So now you learn, we can't shoot these guys. What do we do? Stealth takedown? Nope, goes on alert. What do we do? You have to sneak by them. Maybe certain areas that could be like that, where it's very, very simple. It's just 4 guys figuring out, how do we time these guys to sneak through this entire area? Boxes can be everywhere, and you just got to maneuver your way through this one area. It could be heavies all around, and you just have to get through. Also things like 2 patrolling enemies, or however many. There could be 3 patrolling enemies with cameras above them. So you go to shoot the enemies, the cameras see. You shoot the cameras, the guy, the guard in the security camera room says, cameras are out, base goes on alert. So one team needs to infiltrate to take out the camera room, very similar to the sentries, where you shoot 3 sentries, you take out the control guard, the guy who's checking in with them. This one, the same thing. You have one guy take out a room of security, and then the other guys take out the sentries, take out the cameras, take out the control room. You move forward, you infiltrate. And obviously this would all have to be designed where, very similar to the Division, where they have it's a huge raid, but you're moving in phases, one to the next in these bases. I think the Division has very, very good design philosophy when it came to the missions that you went into. All those set places where you went in with other players and you went through it until you got to the end and you fought the main boss. I thought they were all really well designed. I really had fun with Division 2. And I think we can have something very similar in Ghost Recon, where there are certain areas where you have to go through, infiltrate, and do things a certain way to get through it. Another idea I had was puzzles where you have to separate with the team. So let's say you have corridors that go off in their own certain way. You'd implement a puzzle system where you'd have to coordinate. One team has to get information from one guy so he could pass that information over to the other team who's hacking or infiltrating a server, which then allows access to a door which an other team can go in and grab something of value. So something to really cement into the idea of the players, and to really cement to the idea of the developers who are creating this, that we don't want that type of feel where we're all moving forward in the same path, not really working together to eliminate certain puzzle systems that are created in a cohesive manner in separate areas. Basically, I just don't want to see a raid developed where it's just the four of us moving forward, and there are no mechanics. There's no, it's just basically tank and spank fights, simple things like that. If there's no stealth, there's no infiltration feeling. There's no feeling of disabling a security system while somebody takes down an enemy over here, or grabbing information here and relaying it to the team over there so they can hack the server so another guy over here can do something. The fact that it's only 4-man, I'm a little disappointed with. I think it should be an 8-man raid with 4 squads of 2. I think that would have been a lot more cooler, because then you could really separate people and they'll be rolling out in twos, and you would have a lot more leeway to design things around that, taking guys out together, doing things like I'm saying together. I think it would be a lot more cool that way. With only 4 people, you can have like 2 corridors where one team goes one way, another team goes another way, and they have to communicate with each other to move forward. Something along those lines. Another idea I had, which was like a boss fight, which was basically, I had this idea. Let's say there are 4 players. You come upon a big long corridor room, lots of boxes for cover and things like that. Use your imagination when I'm speaking and spitting these ideas out. It's basically there's 3 bosses, right? So it's 4 players and there's 3 main bosses in this room, in this corridor. And the players enter the room, take cover into a position, and the boss fight starts with the bosses throwing a flashbang. Boom, you get blinded. Oh, so obviously you have to think like this. You walk in, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, bosses, you start shooting, flashbang goes off, you're not behind cover. You get shot up, you're killed, like, oh, damn, all right, let's do it again. You go in, you get behind cover. It's like a boss fight. You have to learn the tactics. So flashbang pops, and what I was thinking is, when you all come to from the flashbang, it's the 3 bosses designate randomly suppression mechanics on 3 players. If you try to pop up and fight while they're suppressing you, bullets are shooting at you, it's like an automatic death. At that point, the team member that's not being suppressed suppresses one enemy boss. The player who is being suppressed by that boss is now free. He gets up, he suppresses another boss. Now that leaves another player to be free, and so on and so forth, until you're all up and free and you're suppressing all 3 bosses and you're moving forward towards them. Okay, so that event triggers. What the bosses do at that point would be something like they'd throw smoke would pop, and enemies would come out. And this would, what I had in my mind was like a 3-phase mechanic, where, so this first phase would be like easy enemies. So smoke pops, you can't see the bosses anymore. Let's say you try to shoot through the smoke, nothing happens. You try to run past the smoke, you get insta-killed. So these are mechanics that are being programmed into this. So you follow the boss fight. And so enemies come out of nowhere, you shoot them all, they all die. The boss fight, the bosses retreat down the corridor, it starts again. After you kill all the enemies, you start moving forward, you get into position, the bosses throw a flashbang, bang, you're all blinded, they start again. You come to, whoever's not suppressed, boom, suppress, 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 move forward, inch forward. The next phase starts. Now it's easy enemies and heavies. Do the same thing, they pop smoke, they retreat down the corridor, you get in a big gunfight, you kill all the enemies, flashbang pops, the suppression mechanic starts again, you come up, suppress, 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 they throw smoke, last phase will be random, easy enemies, heavy enemies with the miniguns, and then maybe drones. You get through that, and then that's basically where the bosses are pinned at the end of the corridor. So then it's just the suppression mechanic, and you keep moving forward and moving forward and until you're able to flank the bosses and kill them down. I always loved bosses that had actual mechanics, actual phases, an actual feeling of a boss fight that you had to figure your way through. You had to persevere through it. You had to find out how to get through the boss fight and figure it out. Now, this isn't anything genius, but I'm giving you guys an idea what I expect from boss fights in a tactical shooters. I expect something that has some substance to it, some mechanics that make sense. I don't want to sit there and shoot at Cole Walker's drones before I can kill him while he sits there immune. You know, I want things to, I want it to feel like like all four of us can work together to achieve a goal. As far as the other mechanics where you shoot some sentries, you infiltrate, everything has to be done in a timing function to where if you shoot the sentries and you don't take out the guard in the tower, the base will go on alert. These are just basic ideas that I think are not hard to program. I think a development team would have a very, very easy time programming simple mechanics like this. And it would add something different than just moving forward, shooting a lot of enemies that feel like tanks. You know, in these raids, there's going to be behemoths, lots of drones. It'll probably feel like an incursion from Division 1 or a boss fight from Division 2, which is basically just shooting things that take forever to kill. And I think the Walker boss fight reflects that. All they did was, right, they put the drones above him, and he was couldn't be killed, and then wolves came out, and you know what I'm saying is not that far off with enemies coming out and having phases of the boss fight. I just don't want things to not make sense to where I have to shoot 50 million drones to do something. If it's going to be a huge drone fight, you know, I don't know. And it is what it is. You guys, you girls, you let me know what you think. What would you like to see for raids? What is something that in the back of your head you think of old Metal Gear Solid games, or even like Zelda games where the boss fights are specifically have mechanics? I'm not saying these boss fights should be Zelda mechanics. I'm saying you see how developers program their bosses to have certain mechanics. I remember being a teenager playing Ocarina of Time. And when I played Ocarina of Time, I was baffled by the boss mechanics. You know, this was coming from Sega Genesis into PlayStation and Nintendo 64. You know, things were taking a step up. And I remember in the Light Temple, for those of you who played Ocarina of Time, the Light Temple had the two witches. I think it was like fire and ice. And they would shoot their magic at you, and you would block it with your shield. But what you had to do was, I think, absorb enough of one witch's energy and then reflect it at the other witch, and that's how you damage them. And I remembered being like, how do I beat these bosses? And when I figured that out, it was like, my mind was blown. And I would just like to see mind-blown mechanics for the tactical shooter. Now, I'm not saying I established that here, what I'm saying that is I'd like to spark the imagination of developers who are out there that can think of something more than just bullet sponge bosses for third-person tactical shooters or just shooters in general. It's almost as if they don't know how to make bosses in realistic games, because the only way they can make a boss or make difficulty harder is either to make it harder to kill the enemy, which means they have more health, make it easier to kill you, which means you have less health. But those aren't fun dynamics. Those aren't fun mechanics. That's just boring. And all you're doing is you're just tweaking a value level to make things harder or easier. It's like when I played God of War, I played it on the hardest difficulty. It wasn't really hard, it was just tedious because I died fast and they died slow. That's, I'm not shitting on God of War. I thought it was a great game. I would just like to see developers implement badass mechanics into the third person tactical shooter to the point where it feels almost Metal Gear Solid-ish minus the health. Because let's remember, when we look at games like Metal Gear Solid, they're boss fights, but they're health boss fights. But there were certain mechanics to those fights that you could still implement here, which is why I went over, the 3 boss mechanic with suppression and flashbangs and smoke so they can retreat and enemies come out. It's phases of things. But anyway, let me leave it there. You all let me know what you think. What are some ideas that you think could really go well for a raid or any type of design philosophy for the third-person tactical shooter for Ghost Recon Breakpoint? Let me know what you would like to see in the raids, what you're hoping to see, what you actually think you're going to see. We can't keep going down this path of gameplay mechanics that are rinse, wash, repeat. For instance, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, the best that they could do for this franchise was to incorporate tiered loot from their other games, loot crates from their other games. Everything is just, I feel like the imagination is lost outside of the art team and the design team of making a beautiful world and animating things. Everything else is the same. Talk to a person, go here. Talk to a person, go here. Let's start broadening our horizon with what we expect from these types of games. And I hope the developers can get there, because you can't keep going down this path without either ruining what tactical shooters are or abandoning the genre altogether. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk in the comments. Let's discuss some things. Let me know like I said, what you would like to see for cool mechanics for boss fights in the raid, in the upcoming raid. And what do you think you're really going to see? And yeah, so that is all. Thank you all for going through this with me. I hope I made my points clear. Maybe I'll have to re-record some things. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just edit a lot of things out, put it together. And so that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me while I discuss some of these things. And I look forward to talking to all of you in the comments. All right. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Okay, peace.